you asked, what is a RAM disk? So try to explain this. I have a limited understanding of what it is. I know enough to be dangerous about it. A RAM disk is taking your computer's RAM and creating a disk partition out of it. So if I go look up my create format disk partitions in Windows, I'm in Windows 10 right now. You'll see that I've used this software, AMD RAMdisk, to create a disk partition, this guy right here, and it's an NTFS disk partition. It's using 9 gigabytes of my 32 gigabytes available to create a partition where I can store things. Now, the problem with this is RAM disks are potentially volatile because it's random access memory. When you shut down your computer, when you lose power, you lose anything that you've saved on that RAM disk. So the importance of this particular software is that the free version doesn't have it, but a paid version, which is, it's $10, has a dynamic load and save, which if we look at the RAMdisk utility that I'm running is under the load and save, image file used for new disk or load existing image. And what happens is it saves my disk image at shutdown. When I do a shutdown, it saves my the contents of my drive in my RAM disk to this image so that it can be restored. It's kind of a way around losing information. The real only fail-safe is if you had a battery backup and also some kind of cloud sync, which I do. One of the new features in this last year, I believe it was in this last year, from Google's Backup and Sync, which isn't my favorite cloud service, but it does have a feature where any folder in Windows, I can right click on it. Oh, you know what? It's not going to give me that option right now because I think I need to reboot, but let's take a look. If I, geez, my right click's not working, so this isn't really going to be showing you anything, but if I go and right click on a folder, typically, not pending a reboot, it would show me that I can sync any folder I want in all of my Windows XP to Google's Backup and Sync service. So that's what I do, is I back up my RAM disk. And that kind of fights the volatility of what a RAM disk is. So as you read things, you're going to see a lot of people saying, oh, don't use a RAM disk because you'll lose your information. What possible use could you have for it? Well, I've been using it successfully for quite some time now, and it really makes a huge difference. So the biggest part of why this makes a difference is the read-write speed of RAM is just exponentially faster than anything else out there. So I actually have my my Chief Architect X11 installed to my RAM disk. And I manage the contents of Chief X11 so that it never gets out of hand as far as capacity. The other thing I keep in my RAM disk is Google Chrome's temp. And it just makes Chrome so much faster with a RAM disk. Just surfing, browsing some big websites that have, like CNET's probably got a big load time. It's just so fast when you've got your temp and paging files set to this. Same thing with Photoshop. So let's go ahead and fire up X11 and that. I don't want that. Thought I clicked on X11. There we go. And I'm going to open up a plan. And just look how fast that read. I mean, it read 2 plan files. And look how fast my library loads. And I've got every manufacturer catalog. I've got all the Chief Architect bonus catalogs, all the core catalogs. My own user catalog is just gigantic. And so you can get an idea of the speed here. It just moves really fast. I've got a reference plan view on here with a ton of data, and yet my system never really feels bogged down. And this particular plan is a huge plan. If I went and did like a new plan or opened up, let's open up something that's a little lighter. It just becomes really manageable, man. It's just really fast. So I can delve more into it, but you kind of got to get your feet wet and start reading some of the documentation on this. We've got a couple posts on this. I think I mentioned that 3D settings don't really make that big of a difference. Actually, let's open a different plan here. My buddy Graham, the Kitchen Abode on the forums, he's got one of my favorite little kitchens to play around in. Pulling the 3D views still takes a while. And I think that has more to do with my CPU clock speed. But this is like PBR settings right now. And I'm really not even being hung up. And I think it has more to do with everything being the read-write, the drive lettering. I know that this has a lot to do with your video cards, but I get about the same performance in a 5-year-old laptop as I do in this desktop with a more high-powered video card. And just so much of it has to do with what you have your file structure at. Where are the bottlenecks? Bottlenecks are usually your read-write, so, and your processor. Anyways, I hope this enticed some people to kind of delve into this. Again, I use AMD Radeon RAMdisk configuration utility. There's a bunch of things, additional options that you can use with this, but I don't usually use those options. I'm pretty happy with it out of the box. I sync my my X11 folder straight to Google Drive. Works brilliantly. So there you go.